The sheriff climbed out of his cruiser, wearing a baffled expression, like someone trying to solve a riddle written in another language. "Let me get this straight," he said slowly, tugging the brim of his hat. "She dialed 911 because you were transporting fish," I confirmed with a nod, still gripping a bucket full of rainbow trout that occasionally slapped the surface, sending cold droplets onto my boots. The early sunlight shimmered off the water, scattering rainbow flecks across the gravel driveway. From her surgically perfect porch across the road, Cynthia Vance screeched like a banshee whose favorite soap opera had been abruptly canceled. "He's draining our lake. He's ruining the whole ecosystem. It's environmental terrorism," she wailed. The sheriff lifted the legal document I'd handed him, scanning the seals and signatures. First, he snorted, then chuckled outright, and by the time he finished dreading, he was shaking with amusement. When he faced her again, though, he had on the patient expression of a man who'd refereed to many suburban arguments. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "according to this paperwork, he owns the lake." Cynthia's jaw crashed downward so suddenly that a nearby blue heron jumped from the shoreline with a scandalized squawk. For a long moment, the quiet was so absolute that the only sound was the trout splashing in my bucket. "My name's Nathan Brooks, and I operate a small aquaponics farm just outside Willow Creek Estates, a gated neighborhood where residents pay extra to live near trees. They're forbidden to touch an animals. They're strictly instructed not to feed." 2 years back, I purchased 15 acres that included what everyone assumed was nothing more than a decorative pond behind my place. Except it wasn't just aesthetic landscaping. It was a fully stocked, spring-fed pond that served as a key part of my sustainable fish-raising operation. Then came Cynthia Vance, a president, self-appointed high society figure. And the same woman who once threatened a teenager with litigation because he rode his scooter without the community's standard safety gear. She called herself Willow Creek's guardian of natural balance, which was Iris Y, coming from someone whose vision of nature involved plastic flamingos arranged in coordinated pastels. Her tyrannical rule included mandatory mulch depth inspections, emergency meetings over mailbox font choices, and a 3-page document dictating the correct angle for displaying the American flag. The real trouble began on a Tuesday morning when she spotted me transferring fish into a transport tank. I was relocating mature trout to a new aquaponics setup I'd built on the farm side of my property. Routine work, something I'd done dozens of times. But Cynthia stood at her kitchen window, coffee mug frozen midair, gears spinning so loudly it could practically hear them. By the time the third bucket was loaded, she was undoubtedly crafting what she believed would be a devastating complaint. Her first message hit my phone before I'd even finished securing the tank. The vibration felt like a swarm of furious hornets. "Nathan, several concerned residents have aerated Thadiware and Turfrin with the community water feature. You must stop relocating fish immediately." "This is your first and final warning," I answered courteously, explaining that the pond was entirely on my private land and not subject to HOA authority. That, evidently, was the wrong move. Within 24 hours, an official HOA citation appeared: unauthorized extraction of neighborhood wildlife. The fine was $250, printed on letterhead so ornate it could have doubled as a wedding invitation. My response was measured. I emailed Cynthia with heat-etched property documents. "Dear Ms. Vance, I respectfully contest this fine. The pond is fully within my property boundaries as confirmed by the included survey. It has never fallen under HOA jurisdiction." But Cynthia hadn't risen to the rank of HOA president by retreating. She doubled down like a gambler clinging to a terrible hand. Within days, she told every neighbor willing to listen that I was draining shared natural resources. She uploaded photos of me onto the HOA Facebook page labeled "Water Thief at Large," complete with dramatic red arrows and warnings of collapsing property values. Then she escalated further, accusing me of operating what she dramatically called an illegal trout laundering ring. I never learned what she meant by that, but she delivered the accusation with such confidence at the monthly meeting that several residents gasped. According to her, I was some kind of covert aquatic criminal, moving fish at night for vaguely sinister reasons she never detailed. Over the next couple of weeks, she delivered 3 separate cease and desist letters. Not emails, physical letters, each delivered by her husband, Richard, who grew more mortified with every trip. The envelopes were scented with lavender, presumably to soften the blow of their contents. The third letter was loaded with legal jargon about irreparable ecosystem damage and violating the implied covenant of harmonious living. Kept up my farm work as normal. Spike is fantastic fertilizer for motivation. But Cynthia wasn't finished. She formed a Save Our Lake committee, complete with matching t-shirts and a logo that looked suspiciously like the handiwork of her nephew, who had recently discovered Photoshop. The committee hosted lakeside vigils, which mostly consisted of 5 retirees sipping wine and glaring in my direction while pretending to protect duck welfare. Things reached a breaking point when I decided to partially drain the pond for routine maintenance. Every few years, as you need to clear sediment, inspect the liner, and ensure everything's functioning properly. Plus, I was installing a new filtration system that would improve water quality for my fish, and ironically, to enhance the very aesthetic value Cynthia liked to boast about. I posted notices on my property, let my immediate neighbors know about the temporary work, and scheduled everything for a weekday to reduce disturbances. But when Cynthia saw the pump truck roll in at 7 o'clock a.m., she instantly lost whatever composure she still possessed. By 7:15, she was on her porch, wielding a megaphone she must have kept hidden for emergencies exactly like this. Environmental destruction in progress. Osh! She roared to the waking neighborhood. Our beloved lake is being assassinated. And by 7:30, she had called the police. Not the non-emergency number, but 911, declaring an ecological crisis of catastrophic magnitude. The dispatcher, to their credit, tried to determine whether a real emergency existed. Cynthia insisted there was, claiming I was obliterating the community lake and exterminating the only natural habitat within Willow Creek Estates. The sheriff pulled up with lights blazing, which no doubt delighted Cynthia beyond measure. She rushed out to greet him in her driveway, still wrapped in her morning robe, but now sporting pearl earrings, as if that somehow granted her extra authority. Breathless and dramatic, she launched into a frantic recap of my environmental crimes, flinging her arms toward the pump truck and demanding he intervene immediately. Deputy Hayes, a remarkably patient man who had endured more absurd calls than any officer, should listen with professional courtesy before heading my way, where I waited with a mug of coffee and a clipboard. That was when I handed over the folder I'd assembled specifically for this kind of showdown. Inside was a neatly organized stack of documents, each section clipped and labeled for quick reference. There was a deed clearly establishing that both the land and the pond belonged to me, the original property survey from the date of purchase, my state-issued water rights paperwork, and then the page that made Hayes's eyebrows jump toward his hairline. A 1993 agreement between the HOA, back when Willow Creek Estates was brand new, and the property's former owner. "What's this about their irrigation system?" he asked, reading it more closely. "Well," I said, taking a calm sip of coffee. "Turns out their entire irrigation network pulls from this pond. Every sprinkler, every ornamental fountain, every bit of water keeping their lawns neon green. It's all supplied by the spring-fed pond on my land. They've been renting those water rights for the last 3 decades. The deputy looked from the papers to me, then back toward Cynthia, who was practically vibrating with outrage on her porch. "And you're the current owner?" he asked. "Yes, sir," I confirmed. "I've honored the old agreement out of goodwill, even though the terms are wildly outdated." I paused. Until now, word tore through Willow Creek Estates faster than gossip at Sunday brunch. By noon, every homeowner knew that Cynthia Vance had picked a fight with the guy who literally controlled their water supply. The irony was exquisite, like a perfectly aged cheese. She'd launched an all-out crusade against the very person keeping their prize. Kentucky bluegrass, lush and their precious koi ponds bubbling. That evening, I requested an emergency HOA board meeting. The community center was filled so completely that people were lined along the walls. I prepared meticulously, complete with a PowerPoint presentation and handouts for the board. Maintaining a calm tone, I walked them through the entire situation. The original water lease agreement, the highlighted sections that mattered most. As you'll see, I said, clicking to the termination clause, either party can dissolve this contract with 48 hours notice. Given the ongoing harassment and baseless accusations from your HOA president, I'm officially invoking that clause effective now. Chaos erupted instantly. Board members shouted questions over one another. Someone in the back fainted. Possibly unrelated, but the timing didn't help. Richard Vance buried his face in his hands. As for Cynthia, she went whiter than the HOA-approved white ceramic gnomes decorating half the lawns. "You can't do this," she yelped, jumping up so quickly her chair toppled. "This is blackmail. This is extortion." "This," I replied calmly, "perfectly legal." My attorney confirmed everything. Continued. In 48 hours, every lawn in Willow Creek Estates loses its irrigation. Every fountain runs dry. Every sprinkler becomes as useful as a chocolate teapot. The board exchanged panicked looks. Mark Henderson, the treasurer, was already calculating how much hauling water would cost. The secretary, Emily Lawson, was texting furiously, likely her landscaping company. Meanwhile, Cynthia stood frozen, opening and closing her mouth, like one of my trout gasping for air. I raised a hand for quiet. Now, I'm not unreasonable. I'm willing to negotiate a new lease under a few conditions. The room collectively leaned forward. You could have heard a single water droplet fall from the suddenly precious fountains outside. "First," I said, "all fines and accusations against me must be dropped and publicly retracted. Second, Ms. Vance must issue a formal written apology for her harassment and false claims. It must be printed in the HOA newsletter and posted on every community board." Cynthia let out a choking noise that sounded halfway between a gasp and a hiss. Never. I was protecting our community. "And that brings me to condition 3, I said, continuing smoothly. "Ms. Vance must resign as HOA president immediately and permanently. And she is barred from running for any board position for 10 years. Whispered conversations rippled through the room. Several members were already nodding. Mark rose from his seat. "Cynthia, be sensible. We need that water. My wife will murder me if her roses die." Trail. Cynthia spat. "All of you are traitors, bowing to this fish tyrant." But the situation was clear. The lawns would begin browning in under 2 days. The board called for a vote on the spot. Within 15 minutes, every term had been accepted. The decision was unanimous, except for one abstention from Cynthia, who refused to vote in what she dramatically labeled an aquatic cadita. I had saved one final term for last. I also require a permanent plaque to be installed beside the pond, visible from the walking path. I said it should read, "This water generously provided by Nathan Brooks of Brooks Family Farm." Do not upset him. Someone actually clapped from the back of the room. The board approved it immediately, and Mark even offered to pay for it himself. Cynthia's resignation letter went down as the briefest in HOA history. "I resign under protest and duress. You'll regret this." She handed it in within 12 hours. Probably encouraged by Richard after calculating how astronomical their water bill would be without pond access, the plaque was installed the next morning. It was polished brass, professionally engraved, and slightly larger than I'd requested, which I appreciated. The installer told me that 3 neighbors had already taken selfies with it. That evening, Cynthia posted on the neighborhood forum. Her post titled, "A Time for Reflection," and trout was a masterclass in passive-aggressive prose. She rambled about learning experiences and the importance of respecting property rights, while still somehow implying that I was a villain who had bewitched the HOA board. The comment section was merciless. Someone uploaded a GIF of a laughing fish that received more likes than her entire post. The new water lease was finalized within the week. The updated terms were far better fair market pricing for irrigation and a strict clause prohibiting HOA harassment. The association also agreed to cover all pond maintenance going forward, saving me thousands each year. Meanwhile, Cynthia reinvented herself as a blogger, promoting ethical hydration and eco-conscious lawn alternatives. She has 11 followers, most of them, judging by their names, probably bots. She now focuses on indoor succulents, posting photos with captions such as self-sufficient and proud and no tyrants needed. Every morning, she power walks past my property, staring straight ahead as though the gleaming plaque is invisible. The best part came a month later when a local elementary student won the science fair. With a project titled How One Man Owns All the Water, a study in resource management. I gave the kid a tour of the aquaponics system, and his concluding statement was, "Mr. Brooks is pretty cool." And Mrs. Vance should have been nicer to the fish guy. Within 6 months, 3 additional HOA board members quit, citing burnout from dealing with the previous administration's chaos. The newly elected board is far more reasonable, mainly because they vividly remember what happens when you aggravate the person who controls your irrigation supply. They even approved my proposal for a small farm stand at the entrance where I sell produce and, yes, fresh trout every Saturday morning to put the final stamp on everything. The HOA's attorney billed Cynthia $8,400 for the legal fees caused by what they diplomatically referred to as the water crisis. According to Richard, who always gives me a sheepish wave, she turned 3 shades of purple when she saw the invoice.